I realized I haven't mentioned my background, so maybe I should make a quick reference. I did a master's degree here at Heriot-Watt in applied mathematical sciences, and then I had a PhD. My thesis was mostly focused in stochastic partial differential equations. So this is my background. Maybe we should say hello as well,
Yes.
something like that.
Hello.
Okay.
Yes.
Hi.
Hi. How are you?
Yeah, all good. Thanks for having me.
How does it feel to be back on campus?
Oh, it's great. It's really nice. I had forgotten how beautiful the campus is, and I guess we've been treated because it's a lovely day as well today.
Yeah,
so.
yeah. Can you tell us a bit about your current job and how you got there since graduating?
Yeah, so at the moment I am a risk scenario modeling manager at a big UK bank, and what I do is called credit risk stress testing. So what I do is pretty much I develop models that forecast the probability of default of different wholesale customers of the bank, and then based on the outputs of these models, the bank does what we call use it for budgeting purposes, and they pretty much ensure that their capital levels are sufficient. So this is an exercise that happens under different stress scenarios. So one stress scenario, for example, could be Brexit or maybe a pandemic. Of course, it needs to be ahead of its time, otherwise we're not talking about forecasting. Or it could be pretty much any socioeconomic event that could threaten to disturb the stability of the economy. So those would be different types of scenarios that we're assessing. Stress testing is a cyclical exercise, and it has been imposed by the Prudential Regulatory Authority of the Bank of England. They are actually they're also recipients of the results of our models, and they are the ones who assess them in order to make sure that they are in line with their expectations, and they are good to go before we can make use of them. So I think this summarizes more or less what I do. In terms of how I got there, so when I was about to graduate, there was some sort of recruitment opportunity that I took place at here at the university. I believe it was an initiative of Catherine Donnelly back in the time. So a group of people came over from the bank, and they presented to us what they work on and what potential roles they have available. Excuse me. And then there was an opportunity for us to go visit them at their campus. So we got to meet more people, and we discussed about different types of projects that were available at that time. So some of them were of interest to me, and then that's how I found out that they're recruiting, and I applied there.
So in retrospect, what was the most useful thing that you learned during your degree? Be it mathematical or non-mathematical?
Yeah. I think I'm gonna focus on a non-mathematical. Yeah. I have actually reflected on this several times throughout the different years and at different stages of my life, and the answer is always the same. I think the most important thing that I learned during my study years was how to learn. I know that sounds a bit trivial, so maybe I can expand a little bit on it. So I think that throughout the years, we're all exposed to a huge amount of information. Now, whatever this amount is, if you happen to be curious as well, you should probably double it. Some of it we're required to learn, and some of it we actually learn because we're interested in it and we want to. Either way, I don't think we are capable of consciously using all this information at all times. Some of it, I think, goes into like a dormant bucket at the back of our brain, or some of it even gets deleted. But what I think stays there, and we can actually use at all times, is these mechanisms that we have developed about how we can learn, how we can have access to information, how we can process it, and how we can eventually use it. So things like, for example, how do we persevere? How do we keep trying? How do we stay focused to a goal that we have? Or how do we approach problem solving? How do we do research independently? Or how do we stay true to the ethos and the values that we represent? I think these are the most important things that I learned at the university.
Is there anything else you want to mention about when you were at Heriot Watt?
Yeah, I thought about that. I don't think I had like a funny story or an event to reflect or to remember. But what if this one thing that I keep is actually how nice are all the people that I met. And I'm not. I know it's a cliche. I might say a few more cliches later on, but it is actually true. I mean, all the staff, the students, I really remember very fondly my PhD times. We used to have every Friday, I was calling it a kids party because it was a PhD students only event. We would give a seminar, and that was followed by cake and like a chat amongst the PhD students. And I know it doesn't sound like the most groundbreaking thing in the world, but it's something that I really treasure. Like I always remember very fondly, and I think a bunch of other people that I have talked to after graduating remember that very fondly as well. So it would be the people and how friendly the staff and everybody was. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What kind of maths enters into what you're doing now, if at all, and how so?
Yeah. So to this question, I should say that I will not necessarily answer in relation to the work that I do specifically. There might be some limitations there or some proprietary dimensions of my work. So I'll just tell you that what I do falls under the more general, the wider umbrella of statistical modeling. So of course, depending on what types of portfolios you're modeling, or depending on what is the sophistication of what is the complexity of the models that you're interested in, you might find models of different levels of sophistication. So some things that you might come across in credit risk stress testing are the background. I mean, that you need for these models is could be just regression methods or Bayesian methods. There's differential equations. I know that there's models that utilize differential equations. Then most recently, and with the data getting bigger and bigger, it's machine learning methods are quite popular as well. So for the models that we develop, we usually decide the type of model depending on data availability. This is a very important aspect of what we do. Of course, it's real life problems, right? It's not the toy problems. Then the other aspect that we look at is is actually the complexity of the implementation, whether it is in scope to have a model that is more sophisticated or whether we would like something simpler. And then we also look at the execution time. How long does it take for something to run and give us the results that we want to use, and how quickly and swiftly we need to repeat this process. So yeah, it's usually, depending on these factors, is usually a trade-off between accuracy and simplicity. And then depending on which one you want to value the most, you choose the model that is best suited for that purpose. And then going back to the data, it could be that some things like cluster analysis or data mining might be important background for somebody who does this type of modeling. It is important to be able to process and slice and dice the data that you have in an optimal way at the pre-modeling phase. This is not necessarily the actual modeling, but you need to do a lot of preparation at the pre-modeling phase. So yeah, that's more or less what would be the buzzwords for the background, almost like background that is needed for what I do. and this doesn't strictly fall under mathematical background, but of course some programming skills are very welcome in my field. The volume, most of the times the volume and the speed at which we require things to be executed does not allow for anything that is not high performance. So I think having good programming skills is something that is a very powerful thing for someone who's looking for a job at something like that. From what I remember, from the knowledge that I had from my uni times, I had a reasonable exposure to programming. So I think a course, an applied mathematical course, or applied mathematical diploma even, probably provides sufficient, depending on the role of course, provides sufficient background for somebody to get started with programming.
What background do your current colleagues have? Are they all mathematicians?
Yeah, so I realized I haven't mentioned my background, so maybe I should make a quick reference. So I have my first degree is in applied mathematics. Sorry, in pure mathematics. I got that from University of Crete in Greece. I am Greek. After that, I did a master's degree here at Heriot-Watt in applied mathematical sciences, and then I had a PhD. My thesis was mostly focused in numerical analysis of stochastic partial differential equations. So this is my background, and I would say for my colleagues, most of them have a mathematical background as well, or similar science disciplines like physics or engineering. Some people have background in engineering, and few people have a financial background, financial math background. I don't think financial background would be sufficient for what we do because it's quite technical. And then in terms of level of education, I think the majority of my team have some sort of postgraduate qualification. I think masters for the majority of my colleagues, but there's a few other people who have PhDs as well.
I think it's funny when you mentioned not a lot of people have a finance background, which isn't what you would expect from a bank.
Yeah, and it is actually interesting because I think at the end of the day, it is important to know what are the idiosyncrasies of your field, like what kind of things are very typical in finance and you're going to come across in finance only. But at the end of the day, math is a much broader science, right? I mean, it can cover, it is everywhere. I don't know whether it's me, because sometimes you see things from your own perspective, and when you're a mathematician, it's like you see math in different aspects of your life because that's what you know how to do. But I think it is everywhere, so it's important. Yeah,
I'd agree with that.
Yeah. That's good. You're at the right place, I guess.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think we're all mathematicians in the room.
Yeah.
What are interesting future perspectives in your job, and why should a new graduate enter this area?
This is something I'm excited about. So it's something that is related to one of the latest projects that I have been working on. So one of the most interesting perspectives, I think, of stress testing, which is what I do, is climate change stress testing. So this is an initiative that the Bank of England had quite recently. So they have required the biggest UK banks and some insurers across the country to assess their customers, their borrowers, against risks that come specifically from climate change. And here we can speak about two different types of risks usually. So we've got the physical risk, which usually has to do with a physical phenomena, acute physical phenomena that we might come across because of the climate change in the future. Things like floodings or wildfires, deforestation, things like that. And then we've got the transition risk as well. And the transition risk is about how we're expecting the economy to migrate towards a greener style of production, a greener style of actually doing business and doing everything. And this is more interesting from a modeling perspective, because as you might guess, harder to quantify. But there we're looking at things, which commercial sectors are going to be affected the most by the climate change. Say, for example, sectors like oil and gas, they might be in the future fined from governmental schemes, depending on what commitments different countries have in terms of their climate agendas. So that would mean that they will have to change the way they do their business, and as a consequence, the way they borrow money from a financial perspective. But also what kind of opportunities that might be created. For example, within a sector like power utilities, we will see some winners and some losers. For example, some people might decide that they want to change their provision of heating for their homes to something that is greener or more sustainable. So that leaves a pocket for opportunity for different types of companies there. So overall, we're talking about different demand creation and distraction in the economy when we are talking about a transition to a greener economy. So that's more or less what we're going to be looking at in the future, I think, in climate change stress testing, and is one of the perspectives that I think has a lot of interest. So there's already a bunch of different scenarios that the Bank of England has suggested different banks to use, and the things that usually try to convert different expectations in terms of the temperature rise to macroeconomic criteria that then could be used for statistical modeling. Another interesting aspect, this is actually also very new. There are some discussions around how diversity and inclusion can be seen from the perspective of our models, how diversity and inclusion can be seen within our models. I will explain what I mean around that. So there are discussions around some inherent bias within our models, which is there because the modelers design their models and their processes and their frameworks and the way that they think. So if they happen to be prone to some sort of bias, there's a risk that this bias then is incorporated in our models and the processes that we have. So how can we make sure that our models are bias-free? What kind of official mechanisms can we establish in order to assess the unbiasedness of our models? I think this is going to be a very interesting topic in the future, and it's one of the things that I would be excited to work on. I don't know how you guys feel about it, but I think it's very exciting. Our lives depend a lot on models, and I think this will be increasing as we are going ahead. It will be increasing more and more. From anything, from getting a mortgage to pay for a house, or any decision that a company might make for their customer, to a great extent relies one way or another on a model. And if this decision making is biased, then as much as we say that we are trying to act in an unbiased manner in our daily lives, if this is underlying in the models and the processes that we use, I think we should be working towards improving it.
Can you tell us about any challenges you faced since leaving university?
Yes. To be honest with you, if I reflect on the information, the knowledge that I had from my university times, and the training, and all all the things that I was exposed to during my time at university, I don't think I think I was sufficiently prepared for a role in the industry, at least for what I started from. I think I was sufficiently prepared for that. Of course, there were things like transitioning from sharing an office with 5 PhD students to sharing an open plan office with 300 people. That was definitely a challenge at the first place. Personally, I had a couple of challenges with using software that I was not familiar to before. Things like, I don't know, how do you write huge documents in Word? I always found LaTeX much better. But I cannot really think of anything that was very challenging for me. I remember being anxious about it, and that's a challenge by itself, I guess. But in retrospect, I think I had all the necessary preparation I had all the tools that one needs to get started, and then I took it from there. Well, why be negative for no reason? I mean, I felt that it was okay. There were challenges, but they were not related, I think, solely to moving from out of university to the industry. I think it was fine.
Do you have any words of wisdom for our students?
Yeah, this is. I feel it's too soon for me to. I wouldn't think of myself as wise, but if anything, I would just tell people to work hard and believe in themselves. It's very cliche, but I think that's all you need. I don't think you need much more than that. You just need to do something that you love and be passionate about it, and believe that you're going to make it. I think I would have saved myself from a lot of worries and concerns earlier on if I believed a little more in myself. This is something I could have changed if I was to go back, but I think that's the best type of advice I could possibly give to people.